to today's Fireside Chat. We are so excited. First of all, happy Thursday. How are you? Hope you're well. How was your Mother's Day weekend? I know that could be, just that could go any way depending on whether your mom is here or not. But we hope that you enjoyed your Mother's Day weekend. And also, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. So happy Mental Health Awareness Month. This is why we're doing this segment today, where we will be talking about mental health with our guest, Christian Nunes, today. So I'm really excited to have her join us. She'll be sharing her expertise and what she's been doing around mental health and activism, especially in the Black communities. We want you to do us a favor and stay until the end, but also share this message out to your colleagues. This is the way that we raise awareness together on mental health in our communities, through sharing the message out, through commenting below, through uplifting the conversation. So throughout today or throughout this segment, if there is anything that resonates with you, go ahead and let us know and comment below so that we can acknowledge it. If not now, later on. All right, let's get started. Christian, thank you so much for being with me today. How are you?
I am great. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. And I had the privilege of meeting you just a few moments ago, but hearing and seeing your background in mental health, I'm really excited about our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sharika. I'm so excited to be on your show with you.
Thank you, Christian. So let me go ahead and read your bio for those that don't know Christian. Christian F. Nunes, she's MBA, MS, and LCSW of the NOW, which is the National Organization of Women. Is that correct?
For women, yes.
She's currently the president, and she assumed that position in August of 2020. So it's going on about 4 years. She was previously appointed vice president by the board in May of 2019, the year before that. And it has been the second African American president in the organization's history. She is the youngest person of color and the youngest president in more than 40 years. Nunes is leading the organization through an intersectional lens, bringing a diverse coalition of grassroots activists to work against structural sexism and racism. Christian is a former NOW board member and committee chair, as well as a licensed clinical social worker, consultant, and woman minority business owner. She's also an active community organizer, public speaker, regularly featured at events such as the March for Black Women, Women's March event, and rallies around the country in support of the Equal Rights Amendment and immigration rights. Along with her activism for mental health, Christian has more than 20 years of experience advocating for children and women issues. Christian launched the NOW's Racial Justice Summit in 2020 and has recently launched 100 Days of Feminist Agenda campaign in partnership with Black Women's Blueprint, and is planning webinar training institute for NOW members that will cover various topics. Christian is often featured in media outlets, including MSNBC, Business Insider, Politico, The Huffington Post, Ebony, Black Enterprise Magazine, Yahoo News, and many more national and local outlets. She received her bachelor's in social work from Northern Arizona University and her master's from Columbia University, and her master's of business administration from the University of Phoenix. Oh my goodness, Christian, you've been doing it all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Tell me anything else that I left out of your bio that you may want to share.
No, I think that sums it up, just working, trying to do my part. So,
You're definitely doing your part. So tell us what led you into this work, mental health, advocacy, and social work. I always say it takes a very special person that really loves people to be able to do this work, because this is people centered work. So what was it for you that led you into advocacy and mental health?
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think when I think about what led me into social work, it always started back when I was very young and just growing up and looking at just the world and friends and even my own, upbringing and experiencing different things and just thinking about what was missing and not having like people in my school or, access to counseling or therapy or people that look like me that I could reach out and talk to. I was raised by a single mother most of my life, and my mother worked very hard. She was a nurse and she had 3 children she had to take care of, and she had to work a lot of times, a lot of double shifts to provide for her family. Um, but so it was a lot of pressure and stress and the things that she could not personally, sometimes be available for. And so I feel like, there were opportunities where mentorship could have been helpful, but I didn't have the resource to have mentors that look like me or people that I felt comfortable speaking with that were, neutral. So part of that drive for me to get into mental health was to be able to be that someone that looked like me, resembled me in my community, that could understand the things I went through without judgment, without stereotyping, without, putting me in this box, but also understand the diversity in our Black community. And so that was kind of what drove my desire to get into social work and be a therapist. Because oftentimes I think, Black women, Black girls are over sexualized, over criminalized, have lots of stereotypes that go to them, adultification that happens, and they're not given a fair chance to be able to explore, develop their identities. So I wanted to be that person that would be able to be there for them, and create a space for them to feel safe where they can talk and be able to go into their identities. So that's a big part of the reason why I did that. So, and then from there, once I got into the work, it opened up for many communities, not just Black, but just marginalized communities, seeing like so many discriminations and oppressions and and injustices that were happening in these communities, and why organizing was needed along with the work of being a therapist.
Absolutely. And I love how you combine the two. But I just want to go back to an earlier point that you made around Black girls and women being over sexualized and over criminalized. I know you've been doing a lot of advocacy in the Black community. Was wondering if you can expound a little bit more on what that over sexualization and over criminalization looks like, especially, for example, through media.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's one of the things I like to point out is that, when we look at the work that we're doing with advocacy work, we a lot of times when we look at those that are most affected in marginalized communities, it comes down to Black and brown women, Black and brown girls, right? And sometimes in this work, when we are advocating, people feel like we're over advocating for Black girls. And it's not that we're trying to over advocate for Black girls or Black women. It's the fact that Black women and Black girls are the ones that are experiencing the most oppression, the most victimization, the most hardships because of how this world has been treating them. So part of what we're seeing is that when we look at what's happening, we see that when the world looks at Black women and Black girls, we look at them, and statistics show this is research based, shows that Black girls are looked at as more adults than their white peers. They're looked at as more sexually advanced than their white peers. They're looked as more aggressive, like boys or male counterparts than their white peers or anyone else. There's not this sense of needing for protection that Black women and girls experience like their peers. So they're treated harsher. They receive harsher punishments. They're seen as adults sexually, and they're hypersexualized, and they're not given a sense of innocence that young other white peers or other white kids experience. And they are also adultified and they get harsher penalties. And it's also we talk about the sex abuse to prison pipeline, where we see most of them, facing expulsions and suspensions from school and abuse quicker because they're just not given the same grace that other young kids are experiencing. So if you're automatically going into a situation where you're not given that same grace, you're not given that ability to be able to be a child, right? You're automatically, ostracized. You're automatically told that you can't grow up. You can't experience in childhood. You must experiencing things that your body, your mind cannot even process. imagine how that impacts, and imagine that trauma, the internalized trauma that you're experiencing, and the feelings that you probably internalize, because even as adults, right? Imagine being sexualized adult, the trauma that comes with that. But yet you're a child and you have that, and yet no one's allowing you to be able to really express that, or go through that as a child. That's not fair. It really is not fair, but that's what we're doing to young Black girls and brown girls. We're telling them, we don't care. We see you as adults. You have to experience your life as adult. So part of the role we have to do with advocacy is we have to stop that. We have to break that up, and we have to advocate more for their ability to like live their lives as young children, live their lives as young girls, and provide resources for them to have the access they need for care and support and resources, so they can be able to live and develop how they're supposed to be able to develop. They have to be able to go through the whole development spectrum and not have to skip steps, and we're asking them to skip steps. So my advocacy is really based on that. Like, let's talk about what we need to do to allow them to fully thrive and grow and have resources and protect them so they can have safety and sustainable lives, and how they should have them, essentially.
Oh, that was really incredible. You talked a lot about bias and perceptions, and I think that tends to be one of the hardest things to change. There is an analogy that Columbia University Business School tends to use about the iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
The top of the iceberg, those are the things that we see, our behaviors, and but in the bottom, that's not seen, are the unconscious things like our thoughts, our perceptions, right? And those are the things that are really hard to change.
Right.
So we're talking about the way that Black girls and women are perceived and how they are over sexualized. A lot of these perceptions live within the hearts of people,
Right.
and hearts are not easy to change. And I think that's the work, right? There's advocacy that could be done. There's awareness that could be raised, but just recognizing the difficulty in this work. I think one of the examples that you talked about, Christian, was when you were advocating for Black girls, there was a comment that there's an over advocacy around it. That's bias.
Right.
Those are perceptions that should not even be existing, right?
Yeah, and Shika, it's a great point you're pointing out, because I think that sometimes we get so caught up in siloing our work, right, in our advocacy work, and we want to separate it and say,
Mhm.
why do we need to do this work? Why do we need to advocate for
Yeah.
this group? When we really should be saying, like, how do we eradicate the need to have to constantly, like, um, even have this gender-based violence existing in general?
Mhm.
Like, or why is it higher for this group than anything? Like, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about why we're not talking to these communities to see what their experiences are and why it's so, what's happening. We're like, it's a whole disconnect that's happening in general, right? Like, we forget about the actual communities that are being affected, and then we just wanted to create these policies where we're leaving out the people that are directly impacted. And that's a big part I push too, is like recreating our legislation that's person-centered and using trauma-informed care, where we're going back to actually centering the marginalized communities to increase them in the policy work. Because if we're not centering them, like, how are we writing effective policy? We're not. We're like missing the whole point. And if we're not using policy that's trying to impact certain communities and looking at trauma and how trauma impacts, and has been impacted with oppression and discrimination and these systematic inequalities, that we're also missing the point as well. So it's a lot of work we have to do. But I think big part of it is to eliminate the gaps. We have to go back to the communities that are affected and impacted and talk with them and engage them in the work that we're trying to create for policy change.
Absolutely. Thank you for that position on legislation and policy. Um, there is there is no way to really change any of this without hearing from the ones that are affected, impacted,
Mhm.
and like you mentioned, involving them in that process, making sure there's a seat at the table,
Right.
their voices are represented. If not, they're the ones that are making the decisions for their
Right.
communities, right? So increasing representation of the policymakers to ensure that those making policies look like the people they're making policies for, so that we can close the gap,
Right.
which is huge. Thank you so much for that. And did you want to respond to that before I moved on
What to respond to?
to the policy? question or just a policy statement? I just wanted to give you an opportunity
Yeah,
before I move.
no, I mean, I just agree with that. I mean, I totally agree with that. It's just we really have to make sure that there are seats at the table. And when people say that, I think it goes even further that when we have a seat at the table, we also have to listen to the seat at the table, right? And we have to validate it. So we have to take it in consideration. We have to respect it, and we have to include it. So it's one thing to create the seat, but if you're not listening to the person, you're not taking it in consideration, you're not incorporating it into the work, it defeats the purpose of even just creating the seat. So when we're talking about having a seat, we have to be really authentic and have integrity with the seat, and making sure that we're actually including that seat into really trying to make some transformational changes into our policy. And it goes beyond just having the seat. It's about including it, creating a safe space, making sure we're engaging the seat, all that stuff.
That's awesome. I really love that. I'm going to borrow that from you.
Absolutely,
Okay.
take it.
Have integrity with the seat, include the seat.
Yes.
It's not enough to just have a seat, but what are you doing with that seat?
Right.
Is that seat on the side or is it really a part?
Right. Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for that. So, going into my next question, I would love for you to talk a little more about your activism work and now, and what you've been doing around racial and sexual justice, sexism justice, and then just anything you can talk about how you have also used your mental health background in that role.
Sure. So now we have 6 core issues that we work on as an organization: constitutional equality, LGBTQIA rights, economic justice, reproductive rights and justice, racial justice, and ending violence against women. And when I came in as president, taking the helm, it was really important for me to work from an intersectional feminist perspective, meaning that we understand the diversity of the women and girls that we're serving and those non-binary that we are serving, communities that we're serving, so that we cannot look at it as that because we're serving women's equality, that everyone comes from the same model, everyone has the same issues. But depending on the person, they have multiple identities, and the power and the oppression they're experiencing is going to differentiate based on the multiple issues and identities they have. And so we can't do siloed work. So we can't look at, racial justice as only being racial justice. We have to look at a person who may be a person of race, but also a disability, and also maybe a person who also may be bisexual and of gender, identity, and also, ability issues and race might have more oppression than they may experience them by just being a person of race. Vice versa, and person experiencing sexual violence and all those things may have more oppression and discrimination experience. So since I've been leading, I've been really focused on how do we do our work looking at everything from a racial justice lens, how racial justice impacts all the different issues that we're encountering in our work. Like, it has to be like the thing we do first, right? We can't take that away. You cannot eliminate that. And also, you cannot eliminate the multiple identities a person has with their experiences with our advocacy work. That's been a big thing for me. And so we have to look at it very individually, but also everything we has to be from an intersectional feminist perspective. So as we're doing our advocacy, we're making sure we're bringing it up every single time. And we're looking at it from an ecosystems perspective for each client or every group we're serving. So if I'm saying I'm working on economic justice, I'm making sure we're addressing and looking at everything that can fall under that issue for economic justice. Women with poverty, women who have disabilities, women who have migrant statuses. We are looking at it from persons who are from LGBTQIA. We're looking at it from people with different race, demographics. We're looking at it all to talk about how that economic barriers are going to be impacted by those different identities, because that's going to make a difference in how we're advocating for them and what we're bringing up and what statistics are going to say, and how we're going to try to make sure we're including their needs, and also making sure that we're bringing them into the conversation as well. And also partnering with coalition partners who are experts in those areas, because we're not the expert, right? So that's probably constantly working in solidarity. Called solidarity. I've been big pushing on solidarity work and working in coalition, because we're not experts in every area, but we can work in solidarity and bring those groups that are experts in those areas in to lead the way. And we support and kind of figure out, like, okay, you're an expert in, working with Black women. So what should we be doing and how should we be doing it? And how can we support this? And how should we be leading and guide? And how should you be leading and how should we be guiding this work to make sure we're doing it effectively? Your expert in disability work, how should we be talking about this? How should we be advocating for this? What bill should we be pushing? So we make sure we're in alignment. So that's really what I've been doing as leading now, is making sure we are moving in solidarity with the work, and we're reaching out to those experts and coalition partners who are experts in it. So we're working in solidarity more so than anything. And the places that we are great at is expert work in, like, Equal Rights Amendment or gender-based violence, we can lead in, but the other places we have to work in solidarity.
No, I love that. I always talk about the difference between silos and working together, and I think you're mastering that right now. One of our challenges around these issues is we don't come together enough and talk to each other about these issues. And sometimes we're working in the same city,
Right.
with the same population, but we won't talk to each other, right? And
Right.
so we can't do this in silos. We have to connect. We have to collaborate in order to see change. So I love what you said about working alongside the coalitions, in all the work that you're doing around that.
Yeah, and we can't see it as competition. If our ultimate goal is to help the community, we can't see ourselves
That's right.
competing. It has to be like, my ultimate goal is to like eradicate this inequality and this systematic racism. So that's my goal. Then that has to be our goal together. And how do we come together to reach this and fix this? And then to try to look at it as I'm competing against you. I understand that funding can be an issue for a lot of orgs. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But still, if we can come together, sometimes you can come together in another org and get more funding,
Right.
than you can do it on
Right.
your own. So sometimes it works better to even come in coalition
Yeah.
and than it is to try to work separately. And like you said, have these conversations to build strength, to bring what we're really trying to do for this community than trying to do it separately.
That was so well said. And completely agree on the competition part. What are we competing about?
Yeah.
Making change. Let's compete together. We're on
Right.
the same team. We're not
Right.
against each
Right.
other. We're
Yeah.
not enemies. We don't have to
Absolutely.
fight, right? We can fight together, but not fight each other. And I love what you said around the funding piece. There's so much funds out there, and if we join together, perhaps we can be able to get a larger pool to make a bigger difference in this area. So this is my last question. We talked a lot about racial justice, and the intersection between that and sexism and all the work that you've been doing in that area. I'm wondering, it is Mental Health Awareness Month. What do you see as some of the most pressing mental health challenges that are facing Black communities? And what specific strategies do you envision on implementing to address these challenges within your role at now and beyond? So not just limited to now, if there are
Mhm.
other things you're doing outside, what would that look like? You said you talked about eradicating this issue. What
Yes.
would it look like to do that? And what are some of the pressing mental health challenges facing Black communities right now?
Thank you so much for this question, because mental health is my passion. I have to tell you, it's my passion above everything, because I
Yeah.
really feel that it is like the underlying like core of the ability for a holistic, wellness and healing. I think that and spiritual, like, it's both to me. And if your spirit and your mental is not well, then how can you function in your work? How can you function in your family? How can you function? Well, spiritual first to me, really, truly, and then mental, right? But I mean, but if you don't have those balance, right? Like, how are you able to function in life, right? So I think it's really important when we talk about the challenges for the Black community, particularly, is that majority of the Black community is living in a state of crisis and a constant like hypervigilance, meaning there is racial tension that Black people experience with microaggressions
Mhm.
every single day. And we are so conditioned to it that we respond in hypervigilance and we don't even realize it.
Mm.
We experience it at work. We're experiencing walking down the street. We experience it on social media. We are so used to experiencing macro and micro racial aggressions, and we're taught that we have to accept it. But
Mm.
what it does is we internalize it, and we're experiencing hypervigilance. Means we're reactive. We're we're anxious, we're responding with irritability, we're responding
Mhm.
with anxiety, responding with depression, and we don't even recognize it's because of all these racialized violence we're experiencing from coworkers, from bosses, from
Mhm.
people in the community, from all these different things that we have. And then yet we're trying to figure out how do we cope with this every day and still survive and not feel like we're one of those people that are trying to, like, use the race card, which we don't have to use because it really is, it's really existing, right?
Mhm.
And trying to survive and trying to make it. And so I think, one, for Black communities, we definitely need so much more space for community-based healing circles, therapy, a space for families to have that they can afford to have to be able to talk about their experiences. Um, I'm happy to say that more Black communities are utilizing therapy now and accepting it. Because I remember when I first started a therapist, there were like hardly any of us, and people would travel, like, I mean, hours to come see me when I first started. And I was on the West Coast, and I mean, it was really sad, but I'm so glad people are accepting it more, but I think we have to have more of it and more access to it and more affordability for it. But I think there also has to be some community-based parts of it where there's space and support groups and healing groups for the community to just talk about the experience of what it's like to live in this hypervigilance every single day. And then also push from legislation to provide ways that our insurance, Medicaid, Medicare, private insurance is covering these things at very low fees or no fees for people and families so that they can afford to, and put more community block grants and more support in community programs, and more funding for community programs to be able to provide these services, because that's the only way we're going to heal our communities, right? And that's the only way we're going to be able to decrease suicide rates, homicide rates, because suicide and homicide go right together, right? That's the way we're going to, suicide by cop. That's the way we're going to be able to decrease substance abuse issues. It's a lot. Well, a lot of our communities self-medicates to deal with racialized trauma,
Mhm.
racialized violence they experience, and the microaggressions and the macroaggressions they experience every single day to try to cope. Our community's trying to cope with this every single day, and we don't recognize it. And so I would like to see more availability and more research to show what we're really dealing with this, the intensity of this happening to us. So I would like to see more racial healing counseling centers. This is the strategy, and we have to have the government fund this, right? States fund this that are specialized for these things so that people have these outlets to be able to get the help they need so they can heal their families, heal themselves, and I think that's the really truthful answer. We're doing it for menopause. We're doing it for women's health. We need to do it for Black mental health as well.
That's so well stated. And, love what you said and how you talked about the hypervigilance that Black people are constantly in. When you name something, there is power that you begin to have because you now understand that this is what I'm dealing with, right? And now that I know the name, I can identify some strategies. So for those that find themselves feeling anxious, feeling constantly stressed and burnt out, or dealing with subtle remarks or behaviors that are racist, right? Whether it be on the job, whether it be when you're driving and you're pulled over by a police officer, whether it be going and being in a predominantly white institution and having to conform, or hearing remarks that are racist in nature and having to deal with that. It does create a hypervigilance. It does affect your health and your mental health. And it is absolutely okay to say that
Yes.
and to name that and to not feel like those are things that you have to hide or that you can't share. And I completely agree, Christian, around ensuring that we have safe spaces to be able to talk about these issues and this feeling of hypervigilance. Is it going to go away? Right? What do I do with it? How do I balance life knowing that this is the reality that I am going to come face to face with microaggressions, and be able to have some coping strategies and be able to heal, but then also be able to confront it and say it's not okay,
Absolutely.
which I will do I would do it.
Me too.
And
Yes.
I've done it many times. I
Yes.
don't apologize because I believe it's a learning moment. Whether I'm at a store and a white person jumps in front of me, I will say, "Excuse me."
Yeah.
No, I was standing there. I think it's important to say, you do it respectfully. You don't have to be rude and fight and all that. I don't advocate for that, but I do believe there are learning moments to be able to say, yeah, the problem is Black women are invisible, and I've said that many times. And I bet that person thought twice about skipping another person, right?
Right.
Because it lives in our conscious and our
Mhm.
thoughts. And until it's addressed and confronted, it's going to continue to happen. But
Right.
yes, Christian, jump in here.
No, I totally agree with you. And even in like the, spaces of leading as Black women, I know you can relate to this too, of the erasure of, saying something and then people acting like they didn't hear you say it and someone says it right behind you and then they say, oh, I agree with you.
Oh,
And
that's
you're
a good
like,
idea.
I just said that, right? But, and it is about calling it out sometimes. But like you said, it's a way to call it out and let them know what you just said and let you know. And then pointing out, this is an example of a microaggression. This is an example of how you erase Black women's voices. And I need you to know this. And this is how you just did this. And then, and this is not to shame you, but this is to let you know what my experience is like and how I feel when you do this to me as a Black woman. So people can educate them at the same time, because and then when they try to gaslight you, let me know. And that is gaslighting, what you just did when you try to pretend like
Yeah,
you didn't, what I said. So
yeah.
there is education that has to happen, or even when someone says, oh wow, you speak well. Okay, well, how do you expect me to speak? Having an education is we were allowed to have educations. There's it's an insult to say assume that Black people don't speak well, and calling that out as a microaggression. Challenging my ability. These are things that we have to be able to call out and bring to attention. So and like you're saying, Shanrika, it's about saying it in a way that we're educating them and letting them know that we have a right to set our boundaries. We have the right to articulate our spaces and let people know that we are valued, we are a whole, and you cannot remove that wholeness from me.
That is so good. I love that. I love the establishing boundary. You have a right. You are not powerless. You are not. Your voice is not powerless. You are not powerless. You have a right to feel, to call it out, to say something about it. And perhaps we could do a fireside chat where we have some specific strategies on how to do that, right? So we don't get people doing it the wrong way. But you've absolutely a voice, and it's important. That you understand that, right? And so we want to empower our communities that if you are dealing with microaggressions, if you are dealing with racism on the job, at work, in the community, that there are some that you don't have to accept it, that you
Right.
deserve better, and that you have a right to challenge it. So we want you to know that, and in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, that you matter. What you feel matters, the effect that has on you, whether it be on your mind, on your heart, that matters. And it's also not okay. So I just wanted to leave that there, but I'll give you the floor for any last words as we come to a close.
No, I mean, I appreciate the work that you're doing with girls and boys. I think it's so important, the services you're offering in New York, especially New York. I live there. And actually, my first one of my internship with my master's program was at the Mount Sinai Adolescent Youth Center as a
Nice.
therapist. And so I know the important work that you're doing, and I appreciate it.
Appreciate
And the
it.
space that you're having. And I appreciate you having me come on the show. I
Thank
started
you.
out as a child adolescent therapist. And so I know the important work that you're doing, and I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to come on and talk about, especially your Mental Health Awareness Month, and just talk about the importance of advocating and then in intersection mental health. So thank you.
Thank you. Christian, you have a conference coming up, I believe, in June. How do people reach you and connect with you and now and the work that you're doing?
Sure. So we have our annual conference, July 19th to 21st. It's virtual this year, where we kind of have some different speakers come on, talk about issues. This theme this year is Women Leading Democracy, where we're really talking about the impact that women have on, saving our democracy and making changes. If you're interested, you can go to www.now.org and participate. If you're interested in any other programs we might offer, other virtual programs are, you can go to that website as well. Our racial convening justice is June 18th. That's free. You can go on to the website there to also sign up to view that. It's June 18th. At 6:30, I believe. And so feel free to go on there as well if you'd like to attend that. We have some great speakers and panels happening. But just if you'd like to tune in there, feel free to go there. As well as I think I shared my other website where I have other guest speaking that I do around the country that you can also find out about. But that also links to what I'm doing. I share it on both pages. So yeah.
It's incredible. I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing. I love to see our work elevated because there's not a lot of people like that look like us in our field,
Yes.
in our profession, that's specifically not afraid to speak out against what's going on in Black community around mental health. But you're doing it, and you're not just doing it for Black communities, you're doing it for other marginalized groups. But I just want to say thank you for your work, for what you're doing. Continue moving forward, continue trailblazing, and you have a partner in this. So count
And
me
a
in.
social worker, a fellow social worker, which I always love.
No, I love, I have bias. I just feel like we're like
I'm a little biased with the social worker thing too. I will have to say.
the best profession in the world. So anyone looking to change careers, consider social work. We'll bring you in the fold.
Yeah, you can do many things with social work. It's many things.
So many. Like you see, Christian is in policy. I'm in all things, right? Yeah. So there are so many ways that you can go and social work, and we need more social workers. So shameless plug, those that are interested in joining National Association of Social Workers New York City chapter. I also do great work there. So join us. We're looking for more social workers to be a part. But this has been incredible, Christian. You're awesome. You're a breath of fresh air. I appreciate you being here with me, sharing this space, sharing your expertise. And I hope this is not the last time that you get to join us on.
Yes. Well, please stay in touch, Nico, and anything that I could do to support your organization, please let me know. I'm a lot of times in New York, so please reach out. Let me know how I can be supportive too.
I absolutely will. I will, Christian. Thank you for that invitation. And thank you all for tuning in, for following us, for supporting us, for listening to this fireside. Do us a favor and elevate it. Share it out. Comment below and let us know your thoughts. We want to hear it. Lastly, please do us a favor and follow us on all social media platforms at iRaise.org. That's Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, I think Twitter. I don't even know if it's called Twitter anymore. I think it's a new name now.
X.
X, there you go. Shows you that I'm never on air. But please follow the organization's page. Visit us at www.iraiseinc.org. If you are a school and you're interested in mental health services, we are now accepting schools for the 2024 to 2025 school year. So if you need mental health support services and you are looking for a community-based organization, reach out to us. We are happy to speak with you to see whether or not you would be a great fit. And then also we want to extend an invitation for those that are interested in starting a business and you are a young person between the ages of 11 and 19 years old. We have executive coaching that's launching. We pushed the date out to June to ensure that we allowed other young people to apply. So if you're interested in starting a business or a nonprofit and you are a young person between 11 and 19, or you know a young person between 11 and 19 years old, please reach out and apply. That will be all for today. We love you guys. We appreciate you all so much. Stay tuned. We'll be back next week.